Maybe there is a way to reckon with colonization and consumer media, and maybe there isn't. So in this video, I want to talk about a lot of things. But the main focus will be re-examining depictions of Native Americans that I grew up with as a kid. As someone who obviously benefits from imperialism and colonialism, I think it's important that we re-examine these images and self-reflect on them in order to educate ourselves, especially as research has never been more accessible due to the vast collection of knowledge online, and that following Native American and Indigenous voices has never been easier. I suggest following Dr. Debbie Reese, PhD in education, media critic and writer Fangirl Jean, and activist grad student and curatorial fellow Larissa Nez. Lastly, we should be listening to Indigenous voices throughout the year and not just when Thanksgiving comes around. Hey everyone, my name's Cheyenne and I'm an Asian American adoptee and expat living in Brazil. I post new videos about race, feminism, and pop culture every Tuesday and Friday, so if you want to see them, please subscribe and ring the bell. So just to reiterate before we start, this video is going to be about Native American representation that I grew up with, and maybe that some of you did too. We'll be unpacking their more questionable aspects and also how this adds to American revisionism and the decontextualization of Native American history. And I've put all of these into a numbered list, so let's go. So let's start, of course, at the beginning with number 1, my name. So one of the more uncomfortable aspects for me is that actually I'm named after a Native American tribe, the Cheyenne. The Cheyenne people originally settled by the Great Lakes region that stretches from present-day Minnesota to North Dakota. They then expanded to the Great Plains, but due to increased settlement of the plains because of Colorado's gold rush and the U.S.'s westward expansion, around 2,000 Cheyenne died in the summer of 1849 due to a disease outbreak of cholera. As the gold rush continued into the 1860s, more Cheyenne were massacred by citizen militias. One of the worst being the Sand Creek Massacre, killing upwards of 500 Cheyenne, including women and children. The Cheyenne also fought at Little Bighorn in 1868, along with the Arapaho and Lakota tribes. Altogether, they were 10,000 strong, and it was one of the biggest gatherings of Native Americans in North America at that time. They were able to kill General Custer, but the war was far from over. The U.S. Army continued to hunt down, imprison, and kill Cheyenne tribe members. The U.S. Army also stole horses, burned supplies and lodgings, and worst of all, tried to force the Cheyenne out of the Great Plains and into Indian Territory in the south of the U.S. Indian Territory is a term used to refer to land that the U.S. delegated for Native Americans to live on. After the Cheyenne refused to move, the U.S. Army stopped giving them food and moved them into unheated and crudely made barracks. The Cheyenne tried to escape and head north, but the military attacked them, and though they surrendered, the Army continued to attack, wounding and killing them. This would later be known as the Fort Robinson Massacre. In the end, the Cheyenne surrendered and broke up into the Northern and Southern Cheyenne, though there are many other bands under these broader names. Cheyenne history and Native American history as a whole goes beyond just warring between colonizers, but also having their children ripped away from them and forcibly adopted by white families, and being forced to go to boarding schools that worked solely to strip the Native American people of their identities. And this isn't ancient history. This happened as little as 1 generation ago. Colonization hasn't stopped. Instead, it continues to rip families apart to this day. Some Cheyenne still live on reservations in Oklahoma, Montana, and South Dakota, while others live outside of the reservations. Today, they work to fight against the U.S. government, passing down their histories, language, and doing their best to preserve their traditions and land in the face of government terrorism. One notable Cheyenne activist is Jaslyn Charger, who's fighting for climate change and mental health awareness. Jaslyn has spoken at several protests and rallies, and I suggest checking out more about Jaslyn and their story. So I'm by far the only person in the world named Cheyenne, but I think that speaks to the larger implication that Native American history has been so decontextualized that white people think that they can just name others after an entire group of people. And though my name is intended to be an homage to the Cheyenne people, it is a little weird being named after a group of people that I am in no way connected to. It's a beautiful sounding name, but it also comes with a heavy history that I never take lightly. Nor do I ever claim Native American ancestry, even though I do get that question a lot. In all, I like my name and it's part of who I am, but at the same time I also realize that it's part of this white American culture that likes to decontextualize Native American history and their people for their own use. It's definitely a fine line to balance, but I think I'm doing the best that I can. So number 2, the commodification of Native American iconography. Because I was named after a Native American tribe, you can probably guess that my family, like many others, was very into Native American history, or at least the more fun aspects of it. Mainly the exotic sounding names, leatherware, suede, and silver jewelry. I grew up around silver and turquoise jewelry peddled by white-owned boutiques, as well as suede boots with fringe on them from Macy's. And of course, vaguely Native American blanket patterns. Growing up, you do start to realize how commodified the Native American free spirit aesthetic has become. The look, I guess, was originally popularized in the mainstream during the 60s and 70s, and it has really taken off. In fact, it's taken off so much and has become so removed from its roots that most people don't even think twice about it anymore. If you do want to buy authentic Native American wares, there are tons of Native American craftspeople and artisans trying to sell their work online, so go do some research and check them out. But we should do more than just wanting to embrace and buy into the Native American aesthetic. We should donate to Native American-run organizations, show up at protests when possible, and educate ourselves by reading Native American authors and creators, because again, it has never been easier to listen to Native American voices. And we should just do our own extracurricular research when we have the time, because this knowledge won't just be handed to us, and we shouldn't expect Native American people to be doing all the work. So number 3, Kaya, the first American girl doll.
Adventurous Kaya believes she lives in the most beautiful place on earth. Leaping salmon swim up fast-moving rivers, and herds of horses graze in the lush valleys. Kaya's people are the Nez Perce of the Pacific Northwest. She dreams of becoming a fine horsewoman and leader among them.
Kaya, the American Girl doll, was produced by the Pleasant Company under Mattel in 2003. She was introduced as the first American Girl doll because her people, the Nez Perce, were here, first. Her story takes place in the Pacific Northwest and is post-contact, but white people are not at the center of her story. They have horses as it's a post-contact story, but we see Kaya and her people at their cultural height in 1764. And this was extremely important to the advisory board. Anne McCormack, the Nez Perce Cultural Arts Coordinator, served on an 8-person advisory committee made up of Nez Perce consultants who oversaw the production of Kaya and her books. They looked over book manuscripts written by Janet Shaw, a white writer, gave the okay on Kaya's skin color, and even her overall design, which is why Kaya's mouth is closed, showing no teeth, unlike the other dolls who bear their teeth.
Yeah, in the case of Kaya, it was absolutely, she cannot have her mouth open. They also directed us heavily on the skin tone, and we provided many samples for them to review in terms of that, and this was the color that they felt most comfortable with.
Former Nez Perce National Historical Interpreter Diane Malakin said that her main focus was the accuracy of things. She emphasized that the storyline being set years before Lewis and Clark was extremely important to her, as well as Rosa Yearout, another member of the advisory board. In 2017, 15 years after Kaya came out, $100 were donated to Clearwater Valley Elementary School in Cooksea, Idaho. Teachers remarked that they love using Kaya and her books as educational tools because at the end of every book, there's a history and context section which delves into the real history that the fictional book presents. They also said that the books and dolls are a hit amongst girls and boys. The kids were happy to receive the dolls, of course, which usually go for over $100, and of course, we're happy to have Kaya's beautifully illustrated and very detailed books. And I, like many other children, grew up with Kaya and her books. If you've been on my channel long enough, you know that I loved the American Girl dolls growing up, but of course know that they aren't perfect, obviously, especially under the Pleasant Company, owned then by Pleasant Rowland and now owned by Mattel. In one of Rowland's outbursts before she sold the company to Mattel, she fired the first illustrator of Addie's books. Addie was the first Black American Girl doll, and Melody Rosales, the first illustrator, was fired for not wanting to make slavery look, let's say, more pleasant. Rosales says she remembers one time when her and Rowland got into a disagreement about an illustration she drew. Addie gives her shawl to a weak, thin woman whose baby is crying and offers to carry the baby. Rosales says she was instructed to make the woman smile more. Razales then says that Rowland told her, "I'm not paying you to be a historian. I'm paying you to be a pair of hands." Razales was then terminated and another illustrator was brought on. Though Kaya's story was told after Pleasant Rowland sold the company to Mattel, and Mattel seems to have done their best, especially by trying to be as accurate with Kaya's looks, story, and accessories, at the end of the day, they're still a company who wants to make money. And only having one Native American doll, but hell of a lot of white dolls, doesn't look so good. It's even worse when you see the historical friend pairings and that they always include a white doll. It would have been cool to see Kaya get a friend who's also Nez Perce, but the American Girl doll brand has kind of stopped making historical dolls and are now pushing the more universal create your own doll, which honestly just makes a lot more sense and creates less opportunities to make mistakes. But having dolls be explicitly from a certain point in time to represent certain people, especially marginalized ones, is extremely important. It wasn't always perfect and it wasn't always accessible price-wise, but at least they were trying to do something different. And unlike Disney, which we'll get to, the American Girl dolls and books actually worked to get kids into history. They provided more information, were more transparent, and didn't treat the dolls of color as straight-up caricatures. And that matters. What would be worse is to scare people so much into not even trying to get it right. But maybe a multi-million-dollar toy company selling $110 dolls isn't the best place to look for racially sensitive toys in the first place. Either way, I'm glad the historical American Girl dolls existed when they did, and now we can move on to creating your own doll and telling your own story. So, number 4, Tiger Lily. Peter Pan was one of my favorite Disney movies growing up. I watched it with my sister and my grandma, and I thought the slapstick comedy with Hook and the crocodile was the funniest thing ever. However, Tiger Lily and the representation of Native Americans in the movie has of course not aged well. Today, Disney has put a disclaimer in front of Peter Pan on Disney+, stating, "This program includes negative depictions and/or mistreatment of people or cultures." And that's definitely a head-scratcher, like if only there was a word for that. They put this disclaimer on any movie that has racially insensitive elements, but it's kind of like painting everything with the same brush. They never explicitly say that the racist stuff in the movie contains harmful depictions of a certain group, like Native Americans, for example. They just kind of leave it open-ended. Like, if you know, you know. And even in Fantasia, they put the disclaimer up, even though they took out Sunflower and her fellow, servants, they do keep in the zebra ladies, who are still servants with garish makeup as opposed to the more demure and ladylike white-coated centaurs. So I guess that's why they keep the disclaimer up. But they don't even put like another disclaimer and say, "Oh yeah, we took out the really obviously racist stuff too and you're watching the censored version." I guess it's implied, but if they do have a disclaimer saying that this is the censored version, please let me know. Pocahontas also doesn't have a disclaimer up at this time, but maybe it will soon. Though I'm not sure that their standard disclaimer would work, maybe a more "we fucked up and both sided this thing" would be more accurate. They also just outright censor things, like the casting couch joke in Toy Story 2. And I think that's fine, like that is triggering to some people, but do they even again put a disclaimer up saying that this is the censored version and not the original? People really like to compare Disney's reaction to their older works with Warner Brothers' reaction. Warner Brothers' disclaimer says, "While these cartoons do not represent today's society, they are being presented as they were originally created, because to do otherwise would be the same thing as claiming these prejudices never existed." Basically saying that these prejudices were wrong then and are wrong now, and they're right. No company should try to hide its racist past because racism is part of our history. People are racist and that shows up in their work. And that's fine, that's part of life and history. And just because the racist things that these racist animators and storytellers eventually created didn't offend you, didn't mean that it didn't offend people at the time or even now. And that's what Warner Brothers' disclaimer highlights. The reason why the cartoons are shown as they were originally presented with all of the racist elements intact is to show that they have grown from it, and to also remember that they never want to be there again. But I guess Disney can't really do that because their racism hasn't even really stopped until recently. Pocahontas came out in 1995, for God's sake. They only recently started to do better, for example, with Lilo and Stitch and Moana, but to say that they've grown past this would be a lie that they'd be called out on. But it still would be nice of them to create a disclaimer for each individual movie instead of painting everything with the same brush. Because not all racist depictions were created equally or hold equal weight, and they need to acknowledge that. Anyway, going back to Tiger Lily and Neverland, Disney never really sparks an interest in the cultures they say they care to represent. White people like Tiger Lily and think that it's interesting that her and Peter might have had a past, so they write novels about it in 2012. But this interest in Native American culture or history never really goes beyond, oh, I think Tiger Lily is a fun character. And honestly, that's my biggest issue. Even in one of their most recent remakes, Aladdin, it still takes place in a fictional setting and doesn't really address like the racism that was in the first one. And even Will Smith calls turbans hats. It's just a mess. Even Jasmine's big power ballad doesn't really do anything as she gets captured a few minutes later. Rather than putting in the work and setting Aladdin in a real place, it continues to put real people of color in a fictional setting, and that's why I really dislike Peter Pan as an adult. Native American people are real people with real cultures and languages and histories, but they continue to be put in fantasy settings made by white people. In the new Peter Pan and Wendy remake, they are casting Alyssa Wapanatahk as Tiger Lily, and she is from the Nahiya or Cree tribe, which is cool. But they're also casting the supporting women of color in Neverland to be much older than the main lead cast. For example, the actors playing Peter and Wendy are literally children, but Alyssa Wapanatahk and Yara Shahidi as Tinkerbell are well in their late teens and early 20s. On DisneyCider.com, they stated that Disney wanted to cast Native American or First Nations actresses ages 18 to 25 to play Tiger Lily, but that the character will be 15 or 16 in the film. And I get it, we don't usually cast kids to play kids, but we also kind of do. The actors playing Peter and Wendy are kids, so I don't know why they didn't also cast a kid to play Tiger Lily. I really hope it's not because they want to sexualize Tiger Lily more that they cast an older actress, or maybe she's going to be like a mother figure to Peter. Either way, I am curious to find out. But one thing that is for sure is that Tiger Lily and Wendy will both be girl bosses. So number 5, Native Americans at Disneyland. I didn't go to theme parks often as a kid, and even as an adult I don't really go to them, but I am fascinated by theme park history. I suggest watching Defunctland here on YouTube as well as Park and Ride History if you're into theme park history like I am. So from the time Disneyland opened in 1995 to 1971, there was an Indian village in Anaheim's Disneyland's Magic Kingdom. It was nestled in Frontierland, and there you could see actual Native Americans sharing their cultural practices with white tourists. They would do weaving demonstrations and dances, and visitors would get to see and take photos with them, and get to see different Native American iconography like teepees and totem poles. It was all innocent enough, and I do think that they rotated out the different tribes that worked there, so every time you would go, you would see different Native American practices. Of course, it was still putting humans on display for white people to gawk at, and it has been, of course, debated whether this was an actual good way to engage with another culture. But I personally am leaning on the side of no. Even though they were paid to be there and were appreciated by Disneyland, it didn't stop Disney animators and their animation studio from creating Tiger Lily and later Pocahontas, which treats Native Americans as caricatures and kind of hypersexual. There probably isn't any way that colonizers can interact with Native Americans in a way that's not insensitive unless that cultural transaction is totally controlled by the Native people themselves. But in Disneyland, it wasn't. The Native American people there were commodities and attractions to bring white guests in. It's very reminiscent of Coney Island and the World's Fair attractions, which also put humans on display for white people to point and gawk at. And yeah, maybe at Disneyland it was under this guise of cultural appreciation and it was a little more respectful, but these Native Americans were still working for Disney. And the sole purpose of their job was to make the colonizers feel comfortable. But of course, that doesn't mean that the individuals working there didn't like their job or find it empowering or were happy to be there. Because of course, there were people working there that were also happy to be there. But that doesn't necessarily change the fact or the reason why Disney had them there in the first place. But of course, that doesn't mean that Disney hasn't come a long way and that they don't deserve credit where credit is due. For example, with Moana, which has really struck a chord in people who are native and also non-native. and watching the Polynesian people perform the songs from the movie is really emotional. Maybe there is a way to reckon with colonization and consumer media, and maybe there isn't. I don't know, I don't have all the answers, but I do think that we're closer than we were a decade ago. And this brings me to number 6, Pocahontas. Again, like most of you, I grew up with this movie and really enjoyed it. I loved the songs, the raccoon sidekick, the talking tree, but of course, as an adult and looking back, it wasn't really that good. Mainly that they dwindle all of the history of colonialism and genocide down to one evil bad guy. Not to mention that they also do the not all whites thing. I think a lot of people confuse the white savior trope with the not all whites trope, and we need to talk about it. I know history buffs did a video a long time ago about Dances with Wolves and was like, he's not a white savior, but he is still a good white guy with a gun. Just like John Smith is. He's not a white savior per se, but he is still a good white guy. And of course, Pocahontas ages up the main character to sexualize her more, and again, of course, they both sides the whole conflict. And Pocahontas being aged up in order to sexualize her more makes me really worried for Tiger Lily in the Peter Pan and Wendy remake, because it seems to me as though they only cast 18 to 25-year-olds to play a 15 to 16-year-old in order to sexualize her more, because we have this very long history of doing that. Anyway, in the end, Pocahontas was just a movie made to make white people feel good about themselves, and that's about it. And I'm glad that we moved on in these past 25 years, and thankfully Pocahontas is not getting a live-action remake as of right now. We all know that that could very well change in the near future. So my last point, number 7, Thanksgiving at school. So lastly, I want to talk about the United States education system. So every year in elementary school, we would reenact Thanksgiving, even though we didn't have any Native American kids in my class. We would pick whether we wanted to be Native Americans or Pilgrims, and then make feather headdresses and shoe buckle hats, which, by the way, the Pilgrims never even wore. We, in our white majority public school system, never really even talked about race at all. And even in my 8th grade history class, we were taught that the Civil War was not fought over slavery. And we barely touched upon Native American history and culture at all, even though we were living on Native American land. Obviously, all of the United States is Native American land, but ours specifically was named after the tribe that used to live there. And also, we read these books saying that everything was fine without even knowing or consulting any real Native American people. And this is made even more ironic when you know that the United States loves teaching about genocide, specifically the Holocaust, which is good. We should talk about the Holocaust. But anything that portrays the Americans as villains, we don't learn about. For example, slavery, we don't talk about. Native American genocide, we don't talk about. Black genocide, we don't talk about. Anything where Americans aren't the heroes is just shoved under the rug. During Thanksgiving, we pat ourselves on the back and say that the day isn't about a falsified history given to us 200 years after the actual first Thanksgiving in paintings and statues done by white people, but rather about family and sports and parades and consumerism, and it is all that. But it's also about the land we forcibly took and the 12 to 15 million people we murdered to get here. So the conclusion. I don't really have a happy ending to this video, but just that we should always remember that we're on stolen land and never forget it. We need to listen to Indigenous people, respect their cultures and histories, and wish for us to tear down monuments like Mount Rushmore, because it represents nothing but pain, murder, and broken treaties. And of course, we should represent Native American people as respectfully as possible when it comes to white-controlled and white-centered media. Disney! In Lindsay Ellis's very good video about saving Mr. Banks, she explains why Walt liked to romanticize history, and that's because it's profitable. He didn't invent the wheel. He knew that white people craved old Americana, so that's what he gave them. He knew that there was a huge market for recapturing that good old American spirit, and that's what he gave us. To him, he was just giving people what they wanted and giving himself what he wanted. But like most things, you can't just paint everything with the same brush. Of course, that's not to say that Disney alone is responsible for whitewashing American history, but he didn't really do anything to challenge white people's notions of their history either. Yeah, you can remember your childhood and your father in a brighter light in order to cope with the bad stuff he did to you. But what happens when the fond memories of your childhood obfuscate marginalized groups who had vastly different experiences and who don't want their history to be forgotten? And though he's long gone now, I think it's up to Disney as a company to at least try to stop hiding behind "we're just giving people what they want for money" and to at least take some responsibility for how they might have had a hand in American revisionism and how white people see Native Americans as a whole. These representations don't exist in a vacuum and need to be re-examined so we can continue to move forward and not repeat the same tired racist stereotypes over and over again that work against so many decades and decades of activism Native American people have been doing just to be heard. So that's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like, leave a comment, subscribe, ring the bell, and share this video with someone who might like it. If you're new here, I post new videos every Tuesday and Friday, so if you want to see them, please subscribe and ring the bell, and my next video is going to be about the Macy's Day Parade and why it's kind of bad. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to all of my patrons and my subscribers. You make my day every day. So yeah, I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.